If you are so overly concerned with, but that's not what the card means, you're never going to be a good reader. You might as well sit with a book.
Right.
They are doorways. And the more you work with them, the more they'll talk to you.
Welcome to the Spirits Beside Us podcast. I'm your host, Chris Lippincott. I'm an ex-Wall Street analyst turned international medium, spiritual teacher, and best-selling author. Each week we'll dive into the fascinating and uplifting arena of the non-physical world to help you deepen your understanding and spiritual connection to the unseen realm. We'll also share a behind-the-scenes look with others who've done the same and speak with experts in the field about their experiences. Pull up a seat and let's dive into these perspective-changing conversations. Well, welcome everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Spirits Beside Us. I'm so glad that you're with us today. And today we've got a special guest. It's Corbie Mitleid, and her background is so strong, so special. I think we're going to have a fantastic episode because she's a certified tarot master, a past life specialist, a psychic medium, a channel, an author, not to mention the host of her own podcast. So she's got a great deal to offer. So Corbie, thanks for being on the show.
It's a pleasure.
Well, great. One of the things that has always fascinated me, if not frustrated me, is tarot cards. I know a lot of people begin with tarot cards. They perhaps that's how they're introduced. One of the things that has always puzzled me is how can we understand, for example, just with tarot cards, what some of the greater meanings of these cards are, because we're taught the symbols, we're taught the ideas, yet they seem to mean so many things. How do we begin to understand tarot cards?
Well, it's a matter of working with them on a repetitive basis, but also understand they're doorways. They're not cut and dried, this card means X, this card means Y. When that happens, you're short-circuiting your own intuition. It will help you a great deal if you learn the allegory of the cards. Now, what do I mean by that? Let's take an example card. All right, you've got the Tower. Everybody sees that as doom, gloom, and destruction. But I explain to people it's easier if you look at it like the imploding sports stadium. Red Sox want to build a new stadium, they have to blow up Fenway first and clear the ground. When you put the meaning in a more understandable form, you're going to always listen to the cards about what they want to say. For instance, the Temperance card. You've got an angel. You notice that the angel is pouring water from cup to cup, but it doesn't get spilled. One foot is in the river and one foot is on land. What's the allegory? Water is always emotion in cups. So if you're pouring water from cup to cup, it means emotional mastery. And you get the emotional mastery by keeping one foot in where you are and one foot in where you want to go. The other thing you have to accept is that sometimes the cards are going to give you messages that don't make any sense to you, but it's not you they're talking to. It's your client. Let's take the Three of Pentacles. This is a card, generally has stained glass window from a church and master stonemason or master glazier working on it. It can mean mastery long term. But years ago I was reading for a couple in Kitchener, Ontario. And I looked at the card and I looked at them, and what came out of my mouth was, there is a deconsecrated or abandoned church 2 or 3 miles from here, and I think you're supposed to open up a cafe bakery. And they're thinking I'm nuts. But they look at each other and they look at me and they nod. They say, oh yeah, we know which one. We've been arguing about it for 2 years. If you are so overly concerned with, but that's not what the card means, you're never going to be a good reader. You might as well sit with a book. Right. They are doorways. And the more you work with them, the more they'll talk to you.
Oh, interesting. Perhaps that's why so many times people who are just beginning to look at cards look at them and baffled by the meaning, especially if they're put side by side, or they're put in a certain pattern. That's even a higher level of confusion. How do all these different meanings not only come together, but all the different patterns, and how does that all work out?
And the other thing is, you really have to be willing to play with them. What I want to see if I can pull up, my Instagram is called the No Bull Bleep Psychic. I don't know if I can use the full word, but there you are. And one of the things that I do on Mondays is I do Twisted Tarot, because it's pure fun. And here is an example. Twisted Tarot. Learn new magic tricks to amuse friends. Rewatch Sound of Music for scenery. Chunky jewelry favored for evening wear. Now, if you look, each one of these things is on the card. I'm not making anything up, but it's a way of looking at the card with totally new eyes. Now, I'm not saying that this is necessarily the meaning you're going to get, but when you bring yourself out of the foursquare and solid foundational way of doing it, you will train your mind to look at other things. In that card, sometimes the cups will be the first thing I notice. Sometimes it will be how the feet of the angel are placed. Sometimes it's the rainbow. Whatever that is, that's the card signal that the message has something to do with this, most importantly, and you go there. So it really is a matter of don't be left-brained. That's why I love I do a course called Decadance, and that teaches anybody to read a non-tarot based deck the moment they pick it up. Now, why do I do that? Because everyone thinks there are rules with tarot, and it blocks them in. They're afraid they'll get it wrong. Right. But with oracle cards, no. So the way that is structured, everybody brings their deck, everyone puts them out behind a screen, and then we all go and see if we can figure out which deck belongs to which person and why. Then I match people up. They read for each other with their own decks. Then they flip the decks. Then they go one seat down. So they're never just reading with their own deck, and they are flabbergasted to find out that they can be just as accurate with a deck they've never seen before as with the one that they use every day.
Interesting. So what is, because I know some know, and I've got a pair of the Oracle decks, maybe you can compare and contrast the typical tarot cards versus Oracle cards. What's the difference? Is there a use case, or is it more
it depends on
individual?
It depends on how your deck talks. Now, as I showed you before, this lives on my desk. This one is Tarot Illuminati, my go-to tarot deck by Eric Dunn. But you've got 7 different Oracle decks here, and each one, when they called me, not I just purchased them, they all said, we want to work with certain things. For instance, this is a deck by John Gray, the guy who wrote Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus. This is specifically for karma and relationships. This deck is the Fairies Oracle by Brian Froud. If you recognize the artwork, he helped Labyrinth and Dark Crystal for the puppetry. This is a deck for someone who is willing to take kick-ass spiritual information. These are not your ootsy-cutesy fairies. These guys march inside your head, rip up the floor tiles, and give you homework. The Ganesh deck, which I love, is my most compassionate deck. It's fun to use because a lot of people don't know who Ganesh is. And I explained he is the Hindu god, helps you through obstacles. He's ubiquitous. Everybody's got one in their house. And the way I explain it to Americans is, it's the American equivalent is you go to South Philadelphia and the little Italian-American grandmother has the peeling statue of the Virgin Mary in the back by the barbecue. It is just like that. He is loved the way the Virgin is loved. And that particular deck shows what you're going through, what's blocking you, what you have that you can use, what Ganesh will bring you. One card says, don't be fooled. You think this is going to help you, but it won't. Go here instead. Now, that is not a spread that I used anywhere else. When I got the deck, I sat with it, looked at all the cards, said hello to Ganesh, and Ganesh said, I am these 6 cards. This is where we go.
Wow. So clear the deck is speaking to you.
Oh, yeah. People have given me oracle decks that they think I'll really love, and the artwork just doesn't work for me. And so I say thank you, but it goes off to somebody else.
Well, pass it on.
And I, believe it or not, I even have a children's deck, and I will tell you why. This is very, very important, especially if you are going to be any kind of a professional reader. Look, I'm an A-lister. I am always busy, open to close, no matter what fair I do. And sometimes you've got your client who could not get a babysitter for 2-year-old Muffin. And Muffin is going, Mommy card, Mommy card, Mommy card. And she looks at me and says, look, can Muffin please pull a card? And if all I have is my tarot deck, what am I going to do if she goes, look, Muffin, death? No. So you get a simple deck. This is the Cat Wisdom deck, and it has pictures of kitties, and it has pictures of puppies, and it's a completely safe deck for a 2 or 3-year-old to look at without getting nightmares.
Ah.
And the kid has a card, and the kid is happy, and then you go back to the normal reading.
There you go. You got to have a card. You got to have a deck for everybody.
You do. You really do. I like the different decks, but sometimes people look at my decks and go, oh, the fairies are scary. I want the angels. So fine, I have an angel deck for them. You also, it's not just what you like to read, it's what your clients are going to need. And you have to make room for that.
Absolutely. Well, how did you get into tarot cards? Because you've got a long history, I think, in the early 70s or something. How did you begin even working with tarot cards?
Well, when I was 9, I read a book called The Witch Family by Eleanor Estes, and I went, ooh, there's magic in the world. I want to go find it. Fast forward to 1973 when I was a senior in high school. That was the year Live and Let Die came out with Jane Seymour as Solitaire the card reader.
Oh, yeah.
Spencer Gibbs had the James Bond 007 tarot deck, and I bought it because we were all hippies then. And I read for 20 years for friends, making sure that I would be a clear channel for the information. My ego was out of the way. All of a sudden in the early 90s, when I was doing some past life investigations, all of a sudden I could do hands-on healing and talk to dead people with no training. That's when the universe handed me my draft notice and said, hello, you're working for us.
I love that. That's great. So clearly, the universe was pulling you. Sometimes they'll give us breadcrumbs. Other times they'll give you a draft notice and pull you in. In your case,
but everybody was using tarot in the early 70s. Psychics were not as ubiquitous as they are now, but it was hippie. It was cool. So
right. It was a thing to do. So I love this idea of spirit. I gave you the draft notice. So explain that. Maybe walk us through your draft notice and your boot camp.
Well, when I could start doing these things without any training, it was a little nerve-wracking. But I knew that it wasn't going to be just cards, and I had to work. So that's when I got this book, Opening to Channel by Sanaya Roman and Dwayne Packer. Notice I still keep a copy on my desk to show rookies. It's been around for over 30 years. It's a very good book for helping hone your intuition. It teaches you what is real up there, what's fake, what not to pay attention to, how to keep yourself protected, exercises. Because, well, frankly, except for my beloved nephew, everybody in my family thinks, I'm a fake and a charlatan. To this day, my brother still doesn't tell people what I do. He says I'm a motivational speaker. So it's not like I'm a 7th generation anything. Everything I learned, I had to learn on my own. Which is why when people come to me, I have on my website, I have something called the rookie session, when you're just starting these things. It is not just what I can teach you. It's other teachers I trust. It's books I know that are going to work for you. For instance, for me, I don't do astrology, but I can point you to the best astrologer, I think, in the United States today, and that's Pat Dumas in York, PA, who does Astrology 365. She does an online hybrid class. You want to go learn astrology, you go to her. That's one of the marks of professional intuitives. We don't try to be everything to everybody. We know what's in our wheelhouse, and when we have to send somebody on.
Right. So what was it like for you when you did get that draft notice, and what were the things that you had to either change in your life or begin to learn more of, or go deeper into? What was it? Put us in your shoes when all of a sudden you're like, oh my gosh, now I've got to start working with this, and they're making me work as an ambassador for them.
Well, one of the first things I had to do was learn how to ground, center, shield, and protect, because we were looking at someone in Colorado, and I were looking at past lives. Mine in particular was World War I German soldier. And all of a sudden we connected with someone who had been in World War I, but also World War II. And we recognized this pilot, and he had been stuck in his own box because he committed suicide. So we were able to work to pull that segment of his soul out, free it. But after that, I was plagued by the number 2 German who caused his suicide and was not particularly pleased that we were doing anything. I mean, I was literally psychically attacked in my apartment in Atlanta, Georgia at that point. So in order to bottle him up, I called on a dear friend of mine, will not name him, but he, in 1994, was able to get a 6-foot ceremonial sword through the metal detector saying it was golf clubs, and it went. He has a sign on the astral that says, I'm a professional, I don't care. But after bottling up that negative entity, I realized you have to have your troops. You got to keep yourself protected. At this point in time, I've been doing it long enough that my guys are there and my guys are solid. But if you're just starting out, it's like I tell people, don't use Ouija boards, because Ouija boards have a reputation. Thought forms, the lower ones, look at somebody playing with a Ouija board and they haven't done ground, center, shield, and they're going, hey, look, Sid, there's another one we can mess with. I have had to handle 2 hysterically terrified teenagers who, the first time they put their hands on the planchette and said, who's there? No protection. What was spelled fast very backwards was, I have an axe and I'm here to kill you. Trust me, it was not their Uncle Danny. And for everybody who says it's in the toy department, how dangerous can it be? Because I get that when I lecture. I usually say, okay, anybody here got a kid or a grandchild under 10? Raise your hand. Hands go up. I point to somebody. Okay, you. What's the kid's name? Josh. How old is Josh? Josh is 8. Okay. Josh comes to you and says, Grandma, I got all A's on my report card. You said we could go get something in the toy department. Let's go. Drags you in, and he points to a box that says, my first chainsaw. It's in the toy department. Gonna let it play with it by himself? I don't think so.
Right.
So, are tarot cards dangerous? No, they are just ink on paper. But it is how you use them. It is what you want from them. It's how open psychically you are to get the messages. That's why it's important for you to know how to protect yourself when you're going into an area you don't know. You wouldn't go into the woods on your own without a GPS and a way to get out.
Right. Interesting. That makes sense. So we know there's a very specific difference between psychic readings and mediumship readings, and so on the energy level. Perhaps you can describe, what is the difference between a psychic reading, where does it go, versus a mediumship reading, and where does that energy go, and how are they different?
For me, mediumship readings are specifically talking to dead Aunt Mabel. That's a mediumship. Channeling is not mediumship. Channeling is when you talk to guides, angels, ETs. Esther Hicks channels Abraham. Psychic is anything that works beyond the normal 5 senses. That's why all mediums are psychic, but not all psychics are mediums. You can say all pediatricians are doctors, but not all doctors are pediatricians. Do you see how that works? Yeah. Right. So, hands-on healing is energetic. Psychic reading, psychometry is when you handle a wedding ring and you're picking up the vibes and it's telling you the story behind it. Past lives are when you go upstairs to the Akashic Records and find the past life that is specific to what a person is working with. It's like, don't come to me and just say, well, tell me a past life. We've had hundreds. And I could get one for you that is absolutely on target, but if it has no resonance to this life, you'll go, she's making it up.
Right.
On the other hand, if you come to me with an obsession, a phobia, a problem, then it works. Simple example. Woman came to me and said, my son is 29. I have no idea why he will not make a decision without me. He won't live more than a mile away. What is going on? I was able to go up and within about 5-10 seconds pull down the life I'm saying, okay, 1944 Utah Beach, so this is D-Day. Your son's a soldier. He's on the beach. He's down. He's got shrapnel in his leg. He's bleeding out. You're his commanding officer. You scramble over the dunes. You drag him to safety. You take some shrapnel too, but you both live. And I open my eyes and she says, can you see my rank? And I go, yeah, you were a sergeant. She says, he has called me Sarge since he was 3 years old and we never knew where that came from.
Oh, wow.
Now, knowing that, she can bring that information back to her son and help him realize he is reliving the idea that she's the only one that can save his life when it's a completely different life now, and yes, he can be independent. That's when it's useful.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, 'cause I think we're all fascinated by past life information, regressions, and whatnot. And of course, there's that famous story about the young boy who came back and kept on saying, little man trapped in the plane. There's that issue where apparently they track it back to like it was 50 years prior in World War II with the pilot. So the question also gets asked a lot: how soon do people come back? After a life, is there is it 75 years, 100 years, 50 years?
Well, remember, time and space is down here, not up there.
Right.
So they can really choose from the Monopoly board. I know that this particular soul, my last life, I died in Chicago in 1949. I came back in 55. The life before that, when I was the German soldier, I died in 1917 and came back in 1918. So it depends on what the soul wants to accomplish, where it wants to drop down. Perhaps living in the United States in the 40s was better for what they were trying to do than being in France in 1820. Because remember, if time is a web, not a line, it doesn't necessarily mean that your next life is going to be in the future as you see it.
Right. Interesting. So it doesn't have to be a set 75, 100 years, 150 years, and gee, or we're learning more. Interesting.
No. And some souls love coming down to earth, love the human experience. Some would really rather stay up there and only come down if it's absolutely necessary.
That's interesting. So, what is it that draws a soul back to the physical realm? Clearly, we all hear it's lessons to learn, experiences to have that you can't have in the non-physical.
Yep.
Are there certain souls that find themselves less capable of dealing with the harsh realities of the physical and thus are encouraged not to come back?
Nope. Remember, souls and incarnations, very, very different. Again, allegory. Let's take the actor Matt Smith. Matt was the 11th Doctor on Doctor Who. When he was done playing the Doctor, hung up his fez and bow tie, then he became the young Prince Philip for the first 2 seasons of The Crown. When he was done with that, he hung up his naval uniform, and now he's some whack job on House of the Dragon. The Doctor, the Prince, and the whack job, completely different personalities, completely different resonances, completely different reasonings for the world, but all brought to life by Matt Smith. Matt Smith is like our higher self. The Doctor, the Prince, and the whack job are like our incarnations. We can be absolutely different people. Mm-hmm. But sometimes there is a bleed through. And you have a situation in one life that you want to heal in this one. For instance, in my last life, I died very badly from childbirth sepsis. And it was being in a Catholic hospital. I had a child that was not my husband's. It died, but the nuns knew. And so when I got sick, they just decided, oh, well, that's God's retribution on her, and they let me die in filth, pain, and agony. I came in this life without any kind of a mommy gene, meaning I had no real desire to have kids at all. Knew that when I was 13. I'm a fabulous aunt. I'm mom to a lot of the people that I work with. My nickname is Ma Feathers. But I did not want to birth a child. And I didn't realize until I had done some past life retrieval work why. I just knew I didn't want to. So this is an example of karma as healing an unbalanced energy. You heal those two things in this lifetime.
Interesting. So what is the, I think you touched on it a little bit, but what is the benefit of having past life regressions, past life analysis? How does that help us move forward? How does it help us expand our current life?
Well, for one thing, it's very important that people understand there's a big difference between retrieval and regression. Regression must only be done by a certified hypnotherapist or past life regressionist because you're the one that goes deep and goes into the Akashic. And if you see something really traumatic, a grisly death, gang rape, something like that, the certified hypnotherapist knows how to pull you back just enough you can observe and not get stuck in it. What I do is past life retrieval. You tell me what you want to examine, what your stumbling block is. I'm the one who goes up to the Akashic, pulls down the information, and says, read chapter 2. It is useful, but it's not as visceral. You don't have to relive it.
Got it.
And that's why I say I just won't find it for fun. You need an obsession, a phobia, a person or a place that matters to you that you cannot understand why. Now, why can I do that work? It's, remember when I said the universe handed me my draft notice? When it does and you take it, the universe goes rifling on your inside file cabinet, if you will, to see what you got. What's my background? Theater major at Brown University, acted professionally in New York, so I understand characters, stories. Words are my drug of choice. I'm a published author, so I know how to put the stories together. And I have loved history since I was a very small child, so I can see the history of the story we're telling. For instance, you have somebody else who does past life retrieval as I do. And good. You show us both the same vision. If they have no historical background, they would probably say, well, you're in a long skirt and a big hat, and it's a very fancy building, so I think it's Europe somewhere, maybe 18th century, 19th century. I would look at the exact same thing, no other clues, and be able to say, that's a hobble skirt, that's a picture hat, that kind of ostrich feather, and you're standing in front of the Brandenburg Gate, so this is Berlin in 1911 or 12. On the other hand, do not ask me to use a pendulum, because I have a slight benign tremor like Katharine Hepburn in my right hand, so I can't trust it. Therefore, okay. I use the tools where I'm good, and I leave the other tools to other people.
That makes sense. That makes sense. And I take it that the spirit helped you understand where your tools were the strongest.
Mm-hmm. Sure. What happened was I just kind of fell into the stuff and loved working with it. Things like spirit art when I can't draw, pendulums when my hand's not steady. It was just like there was no gas in the engine.
There you go. What you were touching earlier on, hands-on healing, energetic healing. Perhaps talk about that. How did you get involved with that? What were some of your...
I have no freaking idea. I've never been taught. That's why I don't charge for it. I learned, I had a dear friend of mine who has since passed. She had bronchitis that she'd had for weeks and weeks and weeks. Nothing was touching it. No antibiotics, nothing. And I just said, let me see what I can do. Literally, that's it. And I put my hands on her. And all of a sudden, I saw the way in late winter, very early spring, you've got a skin of ice on a little creek, but the water underneath is flowing and breaking things up. And she said that she felt heat from my hands. And within 24, 36 hours, there was no sign of it. I have no idea how I did that. It's why I don't say I am a hands-on healer. I don't say, I don't charge for it. Occasionally, I can relieve pain. I can ratchet things down. I can even do it remotely. I have a friend who has migraines, and if it's a bad one, she'll call me. I'll say, okay, which side, front or back, and I'll work on it for a while. The guides I have specifically help me with it. Again, buddies I knew in World War I. One of them, Carl Amel, had one foot that was 2 inches, or one leg that was 2 inches shorter than the other from a wound. He's the one who usually works with me on hip, leg, joint pain. Another one took a bullet that grazed his head and damaged his skull. He's the one I work with for migraines. The whole thing is, I take my work seriously, but me not so much. I jokingly say I'm not one of those psychics who thinks her aura don't stink. This is service. I'm here in service. Yes, I charge for it because that's the way the world works. And if you want me to do this 6, 7 days a week, 14 hours a day the way I do, I have to charge. We've got bills and groceries to buy. But the point is, I will not read someone if I can't get a connection just because I need the money. I will not play the trick pony thing. I mean, there's one segment of the No Bullshit Psychic on Saturdays that's how to be a no bullshit client. And the last one I explained, there are 2 things that happened to me that you'll never get a good reading, and you just don't do it. A guy stood in front of my desk and said, I don't know, tell me something you couldn't know about me, and if you're right, I'll have a reading. And I looked at him and I smiled and I said, I'm sorry, I don't roll over and fetch either. And I turned my back and he did not get a reading. The other one, I was trying to choke down a sandwich with a 15-minute break. Somebody leans over my table, literally pokes my sandwich with his finger and says, you don't need to eat right now. My wife wants a reading. Luckily, my front person slid right in front, and she knew he would never come into this booth. Wow. I mean, how rude can you be?
Yeah, that's
but
insane.
If you're going to do this, especially professionally, you have to be ready. We are sometimes treated like a service, like a burger, a car wash, or a latte. There are people that are going to throw rotten fruit at you as you walk into your psychic fair. I've had that happen too. You've got to understand, this is not just about making money. Yes, some of them do it. But if you're going to be true to the field, true to yourself, you're there in service. Doesn't mean you have to put up with having rotten fruit thrown at you. Be smart. But it does mean you have a right to say no, and to know who you'll read and who you won't, and have your own set of rules.
So true. And not only in service for the client, but you're also in service for spirit, because you're essentially their ambassador, their channel. You're working for them to bring forward their information, their love, their healing.
You're their megaphone.
Yes.
The way I tell people, it's like the hammer does not strut across the back deck and say, look at that Trex, didn't I do a great job? No, somebody held the hammer and whacked its head against a nail. But it's the person holding the hammer that did the work. And we're the hammer, and that's spirit.
Yeah, exactly.
Hand is spirit.
That's great. And you were talking about your guides. You do bring through your guides on a regular basis. How does that work? And how do you first learn about this?
When I was first had a breakthrough in the early 90s, I had a session. You're going to meet your guides, blah blah blah, and the first one that came clumping over a little wooden bridge was a guy I knew from World War I. We were both pilots. And I was expecting an angel. What are you doing here? And he just shrugged and smiled. And in the beginning, a lot of the German pilots came in to work with me. As I went deeper and in some senses higher, they're still friends, still love them to bits, but the guide I work with primarily is my own angel, Baruchiel. I will work with your guides when I'm doing past lives. When I do a soul plane reading, like I did for Robert Schwartz's books. One of the tough parts about doing that stuff is people didn't realize when we psychics were working with Rob, it took hours to bring all that information down. You can't just call me and say in a 15-minute reading, I want to know what my soul plane is and blah, blah. No. When I do a soul plane reading, my client has homework. I have to talk about their life challenge so that I know where I'm going. Then I'll sit down at the desk at 6:30 in the morning and I'll do deep trance meditation for about 12 hours. I'll look at their numerology. I'll bring down 2 to as many as 10 past lives. I'll talk to their higher selves. And then at 7 o'clock at night, they and I are on the phone for an hour and I let them know what we found.
Oh, wow. So that's truly in depth.
Yeah, and I'm a crispy critter by the end of it, let me tell you.
Could use a latte yourself.
No, what I do is I do get wired, so it's a little tough to get to sleep. But the next day, I make sure I don't plan anything major.
That would make sense. Well, it's great that you're also working with Robert Schwartz, who's always been a person at the forefront of all of this. So tell us about your experiences with Rob. How did you get involved with him? What are you doing with him now?
Okay, well, I no longer work with Rob. None of the intuitives that worked on his books with him work with Rob anymore because his wife is a channel and he just exclusively works with his wife with whatever they're doing. I didn't know that I could channel people's higher selves for them until I worked with Rob. I think the best book of the series is still the first one, Your Soul's Plan, because it's very clear how it explains karma is not bad and good. It's, at that point it was 4 things, one more came in with Your Soul's Gift. It's healing, service, unbalanced energy, contrast, and healing of beliefs. And I think the work was very important because it helps people be less kindergarten about bad and good. Let's take the kid Ryan White, who got AIDS from a blood transfusion in the 90s. If all you think about is bad and good karma, it's, oh, he must have been a terrible person in the last life. Look at what God did to him. But when you understand that's not the way it is, look a little more closely at Ryan's life. Yes, he was a pariah. He had to fight to go to school. His family was treated horribly. But at the same time, somehow Elton John learned about the family, basically adopted them. When Ryan died, Elton played at his funeral. Ryan inspired him so much that Elton went to rehab and got off drugs and alcohol and created the Elton John AIDS Foundation, which has raised over $500 million since then for AIDS healing and research worldwide. Now, when you see Rob's idea of healing through karma, you see that Ryan's higher self said, well, short life, tough life, but look what we can create with it. So we say that Ryan had a karma of healing and service.
Interesting. Yeah, there's always the I guess I want to call it a misperception of karma being a debt, when in fact it's not so much a debt. It's just making sure that it's what follows next or what happened in the past. It's a cycle. It's not debt. It's not an onerous thing.
And sometimes you are the catalyst for somebody else.
Right.
Let's
You can be
say
the catalyst to
that
change.
yes. So you don't always come in if you're having a bad relationship with your partner. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're the person who needs the lesson. Sometimes you're the one who comes in and presents the situation so that the other person can learn.
Right.
So again, not just black and white kindergarten color in the lines.
Exactly, and it's very much of the what was the plan in advance of incarnating at this point. It was all there's love between lives because there's no ego involved. So it's the love of, okay, what can I do for you? What would you like my life to do to help your life expand further?
Mm-hmm. It's one of the reasons why when we get our dead people, they may feel like they've changed. Perfect example. I was very, very close with my father. He was my best friend. We shared the same birthday. And he was a fabulous internist cardiologist. When I do medical intuitive stuff now, which I do on occasion, if it's cardiology related, Dad will come in. What do I get from Dad? His compassion, his insight, his sharp medical knowledge, and he still does terrible puns. But what he doesn't bring down anymore, because that was only useful for the personality and has since dissipated, is his anxiety, depression, and hypochondria. See? So the more we are centered, at peace, being in the world in a positive way. That's how we get closer to our souls. But do not ever think you're not allowed to be angry or scared or anything. It's the people who say, yes, it always has to be love and light, always make it permanent. I'm sorry. That's garbage. Because if that's all you wanted, stay in heaven. That's where that is. Down here, we are experiencing the duality of humanity. And saying, no matter how you feel, you have to you have to be happy about it. No, that is telling you start off from wrong. Now, there is something called stimulus belief response. How you react to something can help move it forward, which is a different thing. I did the cancer dance 3 times, and the last one was in 2004. Double mastectomy, ovaries out. They were taking me from a Dolly Parton figure to a fat fire plug with permanent side effects. No choice. So I said, all right, I have to find 3 reasons to be okay with this. I don't care how stupid they are. So I said, okay, number 1, you don't have them, you can't get cancer there. Number 2, the top half is not going to get slammed in the refrigerator door at the doctor's every year, and every woman listening knows exactly what I'm talking about with that. 3rd, implants? Cool, I'll be perky till I'm 93. Now, does that mean I was okay with having the cancer? No. But it meant that I was going to bring myself back to central normalcy as soon as I could. With that kind of an attitude, but still trusting the doctors, letting them do what they needed to do, I walked out of Mass General in 3 days, shopped for a bathing suit in 5, after a 6-hour double mastectomy and reconstruction.
Wow,
that was 20 years ago.
That's amazing. It's the old adage of glass half empty, half full syndrome.
Yes, but I did allow myself to cry and rage and have that fear for 24 hours. I did. I didn't say I was wrong. But once I got it out, I said, now what do I want to do? Which didn't deny it, but I decided I wanted to move forward from it.
Right. What are you going to do with it?
Oh,
that's great. That's definitely inspiring itself. And so now you are also an author and a podcast host. So what are you bringing on your podcast? How's that going? And maybe talk about some of the books that you've written. I think 3 books now. Yes.
Well, the podcast is I did about 30, 40 episodes. And it was great fun, but I was getting absolutely no traction on it when you put all this work into it and 4 people listen, So it's up on my website if people want to go back to it and listen. I'm putting more of the effort into Instagram these days because that's where people seem to be going. For instance, we've got Twisted Tarot, Outre Oracles, Feline Friday, which is always something from one of my cats. Tuesday is Who Dis, a little bit about me, how to be a no bullshit client on Saturday, and past life why on Sunday. There's always fresh information there. I'm having a great time with it. The books I wrote, words are my drug of choice, as I said. The first one was Clean Out Your Life Closet, Clarity, Adaptability, Simplicity, and Making Friends with Stress. But I did the book so that you would write it with me. Instead of saying this is the only way you can do it, there are adventure pages after each chapter where I pose a question you can only answer looking at your own life. You can't turn to page 82. My favorite book is the second one, The Psychic Yellow Brick Road, How to Find the Real Wizards and Avoid the Flying Monkeys. And this is not how to be a psychic. This is good psychic guidance, is art. Don't settle for a forgery. It's what we can do, what we can't, how to formulate the best questions, what not to ask, when to run. So that I don't care if you buy that book and you never come to me. If it makes it easier for you to find an intuitive counselor you trust and you have a good session, I did my job. And if you are crazy enough to want to do what I do, you've got the magic who needs a genie. That's everything I learned from being on the road 45 weekends a year for 18 years to the point where my nickname was the Travel Channel.
That has to be, maybe we can talk about that. That has to have been a quite a road. I mean, for 18 years, you're doing all these psychic fairs and constantly do it. I think you touched on it earlier, where you were talking about the vegetables getting thrown at you, or the sandwiches. I mean, what was that like on your life? Was that just kind of like exhausting? And why am I doing this?
Well, I live in a very rural, upstate New York county. Not the best place to do what I do. So I traveled quite a bit. And I admit it was fun being a Hilton Diamond. You know, you walk in, we're not worthy, that whole thing. For a while, though, Spirit was saying, we'd like you to read at home. And I was like, no, this is too much fun. And so Spirit finally said, all right, we know what we're doing. We're going to have to do something a little stronger. So all of a sudden, in July of 2019, I got a herniated disc and pinched nerve. Absolute agony for weeks. By the time the doctors got me back to some semblance of me, they said, we're really sorry, but your career is over. You can no longer do 10-hour trips in the car. You can't load in and load out your heavy gear. So that was in the fall, and I spent 4 months rushing to get my business completely online. And there it was, and a month later, what happened but the years of Murder Hornet Bingo and Hold My Beer, COVID. If I had just been doing shows, I would have gone bankrupt. My career has just gone like this since. I will, now that, that's mostly in our rearview mirror, there are shows that I will do one-day shows within an hour and a half of me because they're fun and I enjoy them. But that's not as hard on me as the constant travel and schlepping all the gear. Mm-hmm. So that's an example of the universe will do what it needs to do to get your attention, not because it's being mean, because it knows what's on the other side.
Right, exactly, and knows where things are headed. Mm-hmm. There's always a great intelligence with Spirit. It just always boggles my mind whether mm-hmm. or not it is that they actually know the future, or it is that their intelligence is so vast that they're like, we know this a little bit better than you do, so perhaps you should follow our lead here. Mm-hmm. That's great. You were touching on channels before, and channeling. You take us into your shoes when you go into trance. Some people love to get involved in trance. Perhaps you can explain it to them. What's it like? How does it feel? Well, I know when some people begin to train, they get the fear of, oh, isn't this possession? That kind of fear.
No, channeling is not possession. Yeah. But I know when I do channeling work, my consciousness kind of sits on a bench and reads a magazine. How do I know that? One of the chapters in Rob's book was about miscarriage and abortion. And when I got the pre-copy, I read it because I was his higher self channel. And that one, I said, Rob, this can't be right. He said, do you want to listen to the recording? And the reason I said that is because everything I said from her higher self was absolutely the opposite of what I believe. Absolutely. But I had been a clear enough channel that what was meant to come out, came out. When I do mediumship work, I do it a little differently than many. I take what I call their dog tags, their name, who they were to you, the year they died, and how old they were. Doesn't tell me anything, but it gets me into the energy. And what happens is my guides will kind of play charades. They had surgery, they smoked, they had an accident, whatever. But sometimes what happens is they will tell me what they're saying, and I will repeat it exactly, even if it isn't something that I would normally say. Now, there was a biracial same-gender couple. The black partner had died, and the white widow wanted to speak to her. Now, I'm a polite kid from Cherry Hill, New Jersey. I have manners. But what came out of my mouth in flawless urban ebonics, there's no way that this mouth would ever say that consciously. And as soon as it came out, I went, but the women in front of me broke out laughing and nodding, because that particular phraseology is how her partner Isabel walked into the house after every business trip.
Oh, God.
That's why I do not do mediumship in a gallery form, because I don't censor, and that what I put out would have gotten me really,
Booted.
yeah, lynched. What I do is I do past life galleries because I can get them as fast as I do, and that generally doesn't have the same visceral danger, if you will.
Yeah, exactly. Interesting. Yeah, because it's so true. Is that if you're able to get yourself far enough out as you're going into trance and you've checked out and no longer are you having your individual personality interfere anymore, which it normally would, then you become that instrument where spirit's just going to work with you, and they're just basically all you are is a voice box to them, and that's perfect. It's as fluid as you possibly can be. You're checked out. You're gone.
Mm-hmm.
That's great. When was the first time you realized? Oh, wait a second. This is somebody else coming through me. I'm not even here. How did you even encounter that the first time?
I don't know. I don't mark milestones with what I do, because to me milestones are ego. There are some of these stories that I know, like how I got started, the incident in Atlanta, the hands-on healing stuff. But I just kind of accepted all of it. Okay, I'm supposed to do this now.
Okay.
I didn't go.
You became just suddenly aware that this was something that you were walking down. You're suddenly aware that you could do it.
Mm-hmm. When I started to channel is when I got the book Opening to Channel from Sanaya Ruman and Dwayne Packer to make sure I'd stay safe.
Okay. And that's when it sort of began.
It's
to kind
30
of
some
slowly,
years ago. Yeah, so.
starting to open up. Okay. Interesting. So when you were beginning to open up with spirit, was it something that you had always been aware of? You'd always been connected with, early on as a child, or was this something that kind of after that book, you're like, okay, we're not in Kansas
like
anymore.
I said in the beginning, I wanted magic. I wanted it, not spirit magic.
Yeah.
You're 9-year-old. You read a book about the witch family. You think this is cool. Tarot cards were the on-ramp for me. I didn't go seeking for anything else. It found me.
Mm-hmm.
As Spirit said, okay, she's clear enough now. Let's add this into the package.
There you go. Yep. It's like they recruited you, they drafted you. They're like, okay,
Mm-hmm.
she's got the experience. Let's onboard her now.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what's so true with all mediums is that you've got to have that life experience before you're going to finally get that draft notice, because you may have that inkling in the beginning, you may have that interest, but it's not until you've got all the life experience you can actually bring to bear until at that point you become something that's useful for them to work with.
Yes, that's exactly right.
That's interesting. That's great. So as you begin to kind of think about, your role in the world of, helping, people, healing people, and, being a channel of spirit and being, the instrument for spirit, what are some of the things that, you might give just as sort of as a piece of advice for a listener who right now is beginning their spiritual path? What words of wisdom might you add?
Do it because you want to learn. Do it because you want to be in service, even if it's only to yourself. Do not go into this thinking you're going to get a reality show. Do not go into this thinking you're going to make a ton of money. You do it because Spirit pokes you on the shoulder and says, yo, I got this thing. You want to play. And you say yes or no. We can all do what I do. I'm not special, but some of us, it's the circuit breaker. Some people, it's all locked and rusted shut. They think I do the devil's work. And some people think there's nothing to it, but they always know when their mother-in-law is coming over, they have a short in the system. And some people really want to be connected with spirit in this way, and they learn how to work the circuit breaker.
Interesting. Or they get that book, the channel like you were talking about.
Yep. There you go. Sorry, it's backwards.
Yeah.
So.
There you go. That's it's one of the great ones. Well, fantastic, Corbie. This was wonderful having you on. Do you have any last minute words of advice for somebody, or do you feel that was a good summation of what a person might need to hear?
Basically, again and again, you can do what I do. I'm not special. But I take my work very seriously and me not so much. And that's the best way to do this work, is the work is what's serious. Do not look at yourself like, now I'm this great person. You are just the instrument Spirit is using.
Mm-hmm. And Spirit is always trying to create more instruments. There's never a lack. That's the big thing I've learned to say, and that's what we're starting to see more and more. As we're starting to see a greater degree of the consciousness on the earth shifting. They're getting more and more people, which is clearly a huge momentum right there. Well, wonderful, Corbie. Thank you so much for being on the show, and everybody, thank you for listening. And if you are liking what you're hearing, definitely like and subscribe, and give us more feedback for what you'd like to hear as well. So as of this moment, thank you again for listening in. And this is Chris sending you love and light, and look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Spirits Beside Us. Make sure you head over to the show notes for all the links and information on this week's episode. You can check it out at spiritsbesideus.com. If you love this episode as much as I did, head over to rate and subscribe so you never miss an episode. Also, if you're looking for a community of spiritual seekers like yourself, make sure you join my Facebook page, Spirits Beside Us Podcast on Facebook. This is Chris signing off, sending you love and light. I can't wait to connect with you again on Wednesday.